I'm Travis Bader, and this is the Silvercore Podcast. Join me as I discuss matters related to hunting, fishing, and outdoor pursuits with the people and businesses that comprise the community. If you're new to Silvercore, be sure to check out our website, www.silvercore.ca, where you can learn more about courses, services, and products that we offer, as well as how you can join the Silvercore Club, which includes $10 million in North America-wide liability insurance to ensure you are properly covered during your outdoor adventures. Silvercore has been providing bear safety training to industry professionals, both in person as well as online, for many years, but this marks the first time that I've had the opportunity to sit down and speak with someone who survived a horrific grizzly bear attack by using his pocket knife. For those of you who are following #Silvercore Podcast on social media, you'll know that I've been steadily building a custom podcast studio. If the audio sounds a bit different in this episode, it's because it was recorded on location as I traveled to meet Colin Dowler, who was gracious enough to have me in his home and share with you his harrowing experience of grit and tenacity. Colin wants to share his story to add to the knowledge base of bear behavior and encounters so that you are better aware of potential dangers and to motivate you to become properly prepared and educated prior to entering into bear country. I should warn that there are sections of this podcast that will be intense and graphic, and listener discretion is advised. Finally, if you are enjoying the Silvercore Podcast, it would sure help us out if you like, subscribe, write a review or comment, and share with your friends. Colin, thank you very much for having me into your home and sitting down with me to do this podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
We're here on the island in Campbell River right now, and you've lived on the island for quite some time, haven't you, all your life?
Yeah, 45 years.
And you grew up in Campbell River?
I grew up on Quadra Island. I went to high school in Campbell River. So we took a ferry to school each morning and home each afternoon as Quadra Island kids. And then I moved to Campbell River in 2003.
What brought you over to Campbell River?
The convenience of it, just for work-wise. Right, in the economy, it was a better place to purchase a house here than on Quadra.
Right.
And, you know, over 90% of my employment was in Campbell River.
And what do you do for work here?
Well, I'm an electrician by trade, and right now I'm the manager of maintenance and operations for Island Health for the North Island.
Growing up in this area, you've got a lot of bears in Campbell River. You're no stranger to being around bears. You see black bears typically over here. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, for sure. We have black bears in the neighborhood from spring through till fall.
And what about being outdoors? Is that something that you grew up being in the outdoors?
For sure.
Yeah? Tell me about that.
Well, I mean, again, Quadra Island kid. I mean, I had a friend move out from Ontario, and they said that, you know, just driving the roads of Quadra is like driving through a forest. We didn't have cable television. I had a couple of fuzzy channels if your antenna was working.
Yeah.
Growing up, it wasn't until graduating year, grade 12, 1992, that we got cable television. So for entertainment, you typically find yourself outdoors.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, I was really into the, you know, mushroom picking and fishing more than anything.
And you did a lot of fishing?
Yeah, lots of trout fishing. Yeah, and I guess, I mean, the trout fishing evolved in, I mean, it's hard as a kid to fish salmon without an adult with you, right?
Right.
To get on your bicycle and, you know, pack your fly rod or spinning rod, you know, to a local stream was a little easier. But I became a fishing guide when I graduated grade 11.
Wow.
Right? So I was a 16-year-old fishing guide for a local resort.
Wow, is that common to be that young and be a fishing guide?
No, but not unheard of.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, I mean, I think if you have the passion for it, like myself and some of my peers had, to get in there at that age wasn't inconceivable.
That's really cool. So what did you do as a fishing guide?
Well, I worked at April Point Lodge on Quadra and a little bit at Painter's Lodge. And basically, you just, you know, took people for day trips out and started in a 15-foot whaler. And then moved up. I was in a 17-foot whaler by the end of it all. And occasionally would get onto people's larger boats, you know, if wealthy customer had their own 27-foot whaler, right? And right, I would get into their boat and guide them out of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'd be day trips, anything from, you know, 4 hours to 16 hours chasing around local coho and Chinook mostly.
When I read about your experience, it's human nature. You take a look at this and you say, well, that would never happen to me. But it happened to you. Let's talk a little bit about what brought you to be out in the woods. On that fateful day, that happened when? That was in July, was it?
July 29th, 2019.
July 29th. And if I read correctly, that was right around your birthday, wasn't it?
I woke up the next morning out of surgery on my birthday.
Wow. What drove you to be outside in the woods on that day?
On that day, well, I guess for what it's worth, my wife and I were hiking locally and had planned to do a lot of hiking locally this summer. My older brother and I had planned to attempt to hike Mount Doogie Dowler in the near future, probably next summer or next September. So my wife and I had contemplated doing a local hike together.
Okay.
And ultimately decided that I guess she wanted to not take on such a challenging hike as the one that we were thinking on doing that weekend.
Okay, yeah.
And I don't know anyone else that wants to go bushwhacking on the mainland to go route finding up Mount Doogie Dowler other than my brother, but our schedules don't line up. His days off are on midweek.
Yeah.
So it was a convenient opportunity for me to go out on my own to the mainland to do some reconnaissance for this hike, because my wife and I weren't going to go on our trip together.
So you've never been up to Mount Doogie Dowler before?
No, I have actually.
I guess it must have been a while back if you're looking for a new route.
So I guess I want to say it was about 20 years ago.
Okay.
That I had done 2 different hikes up Doogie, and same idea. One was to, get there in the boat and sort out, hey, can this be done? And then a second attempt in earnest, where we got turned around by weather while we were trying to summit. So then here I am 20 years later. About 5 weeks earlier, I did a spur of the moment, quick, just bomb in there to see if it was being actively logged, if you could even land a boat there, et cetera,
Sure.
what shape the roads were in. So I'd actually done a decent bit of reconnaissance 5 weeks earlier.
So Mount Doogie Dowler, that's one that kind of looks like a cowboy hat when you're on Quadra Island. That's one of the higher peaks there, isn't it? If not the highest peak that you can kind of see.
Yeah, it's amongst the more prominent peaks when you're looking from Vancouver Island that way. Like, it isn't the highest, it's fairly close as well, right?
Have you had a successful summit on that mountain before?
I have not.
Okay.
I've got a close friend that has, though.
I have to ask, is a summit in the future?
For what it's worth, I'm okay if I never hike the mountain, and I always have been. And it was just recently when my brother and I got talking about it, and we were both getting back into shape, right? Each being in our mid-40s,
Yeah.
And each having moved into desk jobs,
Yeah.
right? We were getting back into shape and thought, you know what, this would be an excellent goal and a worthy thing to attempt to do.
Well, and I can't help but notice, and I know a little bit about the background on this, but it's called Mount Doogie Dowler. You're Colin Dowler. Can you tell me a little bit about how that mountain got its name?
My grandpa Doogie, or I guess Grandpa Doogie Dowler, but we knew him as Grandpa Doogie.
Yeah.
He lived on Quadra for a long time, was the local grocery store owner and postmaster. And when he died in 82 or 83, one of the local families pursued getting the peak named after him. Yeah, because they knew it, or they suspected it didn't have a name.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought so.
So it's got some family history there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and actually from Harriet Bay, where his store was, and also his home, there's a view of Mount Doogie Dowler from there.
So you just sit at home and stare at the mountain, which is now named after him.
That's right.
That's really cool. So you, I guess, a more spur of the moment to go up around your birthday, or?
Yeah, that's right. The first trip was spur of the moment, and this one also was. I intended on doing a reconnaissance hike
Right.
before September, and I was just at the beginning of some days off, so there was probably the trip was going to happen. It just so happened that it was a fairly quick decision that I was going that day.
So what did you bring with you?
Had, of course, my backpack, hiking poles, mountain bike, the bivvy sack, which would be my first time using one of those. It was an experiment to see how comfortable or miserable it was being in a little bivvy.
Yeah.
Packed pretty light, had a small amount of clothing, more than enough food, but it really wasn't much food.
Okay.
And that's about it.
What about bear spray, air horn, firearm?
Yeah, so I didn't have an air horn or a firearm, and I left without bear spray. And I did, I thought bear spray would be a good idea because the time that I was up there prior, there was a lot of bear sign.
So it kind of crossed your mind, but just fleetingly?
No, probably more than that. My dad had called the night before I left, and he was out in his boat with his partner, and they were heading sort of out of cell range, a little further than he generally ventures.
Okay. So
he was calling to let me know that, he was going off the grid.
Okay.
So it was a convenient time for me to tell him that, hey, so am I. Typically, I would leave an itinerary with him, but my wife knew well enough, where I was going, what was going on. So she had the itinerary. And he had mentioned that, he had bear spray in and amongst his wares, whether it was, past his due date or not, he wasn't sure, but I should consider grabbing it. So we chatted a bunch about bear safety and, how afraid of bears he is. And, I debated whether I should be more afraid of them than I am or not, because I've honestly never been afraid of bears and cougars, and I've got the belief of, well, it's like being hit by lightning. You can't fear that or you'll never get out there.
That's a good point. And where you live, I mean, we've got cougars here. We've got a lot of black bear out here. It's more of a common occurrence to see or hear about them being in your area, and that familiarity breeds a certain amount of comfort.
For sure.
Yeah.
And they always run, don't they?
Yeah, they typically do. So you packed up, you got in your boat, you took your boat and your bike over to, where did you go?
To the mouth of the Quaddam River in Ramsey Arm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I got there and tied up to the dock and started biking out there and realized that the camp was active.
Okay.
5 weeks earlier, the camp wasn't active.
Okay.
So I poked around the camp and, yelled hello, hello, hello until I got the ear of the camp cook.
Okay.
Who would also be their level 3 first aid attendant.
All right.
And so we got chatting. I asked about if it was all right for me to use the dock. And he mentioned they actually had a couple of crew boats that had been coming and going each day. I'm not sure if there was 2 boats coming and going or just one, but either way, the potential combination of boats at the dock was such there wasn't room for me to park on it.
Sure.
So I parked on the log boom nearby and swam into the dock.
Okay. How'd you get your bike off? Oh, I guess you just took your bike off of the dock. I just left everything, yeah.
Okay. Clothes, bike, everything on the dock.
Yeah. So got your bike off, all your kit, and got on your bicycle, started riding down the road, or?
No, so not fully. So again, in chatting with the camp cook, he asked me if there's anything I needed. And I said, well, bear spray would be nice.
You even brought that up with him?
Yes. And so he gave me some pepper spray.
Oh, cool.
So that was nice, yeah. So I'm embarrassed now in hindsight, obviously, that I wasn't more prepared on my way in. But again, I've generally always been fairly happy-go-lucky in the woods, and never thought I'd be the guy. So I got the bear spray from him, and then he offered, as has always been my experience in logging camps, offered me a ride to where my jumping off point was going to be.
I've done the same in the past. And if they are going that way, or if they're able to do it, that's typically been my experience as well too.
Yeah, and I haven't landed at a lot of active camps, but my experience has always been that they're very generous and happy to have you there, and to share with you what they're conveniently able.
Right.
Yeah, so he gave me a lift to about the 9 kilometer mark.
Oh, save some time. That's nice.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you got off the 9 kilometer mark, and did you park the bike there and just had it for transport back?
That's right.
And you decided to start hiking from there? Or did you just set up camp there?
No. Yeah, no, that would hike from there. My like the hopeful mission was to find a route that would get me into the subalpine or even the alpine.
Have you done a lot of work in the alpine, a lot of hiking in the alpine?
No.
Okay.
No, I've done some. Certainly not a lot.
So now you started hiking uphill, looking for different routes to get into the area, and at some point you spent the night, I guess.
Yeah.
So you set up camp, and were you seeing much bear sign around?
Not the higher I got, no.
Okay.
But in the beginning, so Vito had driven me as far as the road would conveniently allow.
And that's the camp cook.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then I got onto an old grade that I suspect would have been from when they logged there in the 60s. So as I pushed through the overgrown road,
Yeah.
what I noticed was when I was there 5 weeks prior, there was some bear sign in there, not a ton.
Sure.
Most of the bear sign was on the more built logging road on the way up, and I rode that on my mountain bike on the way up, so it's a slow go. And then at the point that I had to ditch my mountain bike, there was still bear scat. I didn't really notice if any of it was fresh. None of it struck me as super fresh.
Sure.
This time, a lot of the elderberries mostly seem to have been pulled down into the trail.
That's a good observation.
Yeah, and I suspect that's from bears pulling the trees down to get at the berries.
Right. Different people have different levels of awareness, and a lot of people think about going out into the bush as a place for them to turn their brain off and just be one with nature and just experience the wilderness. And I don't know, personally, from my perspective, that's the last place I want to turn my brain off. Whenever I turn my brain off, I end up injuring myself. There's a guy by the name of Colonel Jeff Cooper, and he created a color code system of awareness, and he takes it through from color code white, and he says a person traveling around, walking around in condition white's got the awareness level of a victim, essentially. They're completely unaware, and things will just happen to them. And then he progresses up to yellow, and yellow is you're alert, you're paying attention to your surroundings, but you're not paranoid. Orange would be, okay, I heard a snap in the bushes, I'm now hyper alert, there's something going on, right? Red, the fight's on. And then black would be you've completely submitted to whatever is happening around you. You're overwhelmed and you don't know how to act. Out of that scale, where would you place yourself? Like, are you pretty freaked out that there might be a bear and you're pretty paranoid looking around every corner in condition orange, or would you be just casually alert to your surroundings in yellow? Clearly not white.
I would say casually alert. I mean, I was being loud, like deliberately loud.
Yeah.
And same as the first time I was up there. I wasn't as worried this time. I'm not sure why. Although I thought the pulled down bushes were concerning. Right? That it wasn't like that the time prior.
Right.
So it's struck me as potentially more active than it was 5 weeks earlier.
So are you singing or have a bell or anything?
Yeah, well, I had a bell, but I also had that on while I was riding my bike down the road.
Sure.
But yes, my wife asked me to wear a bell, so I was wearing the bell. Yeah, and I would sing or just make silly rhymes or, just do the odd, blurt of some sort, right? I just come on. I mean, I'm not going to do it now because I'm embarrassed about what it might sound like. But the idea is just to be loud enough, often enough that a bear would hear you and move away, right?
Any casual observer would think you're crazy, but
sure.
Making that noise typically that alerts a bear. You're in the area. I mean, they can smell really good. They can see and hear better than we can. They can smell like up to 20 miles away if the wind's carrying it.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So I guess you hiked for a while, got tired, or it got dark, and you decided it's time to set up in the bivy bag and. Yeah.
So I guess so. I didn't get particularly tired.
Okay.
I mean, you're hiking uphill, so.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, ultimately what I got to was a dead end.
Okay.
Yeah. And when I hit the dead end, I'm going to guess it was about 5:30.
Okay.
And I thought to myself, I've got time now to turn around and head back down and camp closer to the base of the hill,
Okay.
rather than stay up here. I thought, I'm not going to have time to actually get back into my boat and get home. And then I thought, I don't really want to camp at the base where there was all of that bear sign.
Right.
And then I also didn't want to, on my descent, take a bad route that I had to backtrack on and get caught at dusk on a side hill, because where I was a pretty good camping spot.
Sure.
So I chose just to poke around and kill time until dark.
Okay. What were you eating? Were you cooking something up?
No, it was strictly dry food.
Okay.
So yeah, I had some homemade venison pepperoni.
Very nice.
Some jerky, power bar. I can't remember what I had for nuts, and I had some kind of trail mix with me.
Do you hunt?
Yeah.
Okay, so it was your venison.
Yeah, pure venison pepperoni. I don't cut it with anything. Just eats more like a jerky, to be honest.
And the thought of bringing a firearm up was just extra weight?
Yeah, and just didn't even think of it.
Okay.
Again, I went into it with, not a lot of bear paranoia.
Yeah, no, I get that. So
actually, to add to that, I did an alpine hike with my dad and one of his friends. I can't remember when, but it might have been, 20 years ago.
Right.
And they packed a rifle, or Jan, his friend, I believe, packed a rifle the whole way. And I remember just laughing about how silly I thought that was, that they were that afraid of bears, that they would carry this silly rifle from sea level up into, 6,500 feet or whichever.
Yeah, it's one of those things, you don't encounter a predatory animal and you're like, why did I bring this thing? It was so heavy. I could have packed more whatever, or just had a lighter pack.
Well, apparently I should have had more appreciation for their wisdom rather than laugh at it thinking it was folly.
Uh-huh. So you wake up in the morning the next day, you had a good sleep. How did the bivy bag work?
Oh, it's a miserable sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
I've never been a big fan of the bivy sacks. No.
Yeah, and I don't know that this is the highest quality bivy there ever was, right? Yeah. But either way, not knowing any better, it was wet.
Yeah.
And I generally have to get up to pee in the night.
Yeah, sure.
So getting in and out of that thing and just kind of sliding in and out of it from all the moisture from my breathing and sweat.
You didn't bring your pee bottle.
Yeah, no, I don't know if there would be room to even use that in one of those things. It was tight quarters for sure.
Pretty tight one.
Yeah.
So you woke up at dawn, when the sun broke from an uncomfortable rest.
Yeah, well, knowing how much dew would be in there, I gutted first light out as long as I could.
Yeah, okay.
Before I got out to start my morning. Yeah.
Then what happened?
I broke camp and packed everything up, grabbed all my stuff, filled my water bottle full, and started poking my way back down the hill.
How long were you hiking for?
On the way down?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe 4 hours.
Okay. And finally got to your bicycle. Were you seeing any more increased activity? Were you smelling anything? Do you think maybe you're being stalked for a while?
You know what? No, I don't think it was stalking me.
Okay.
My nose of my senses, my nose is my weak link.
Okay.
So, yeah, smelling stuff is not, and I didn't notice any difference on the way out than I did on the way in. Although, it could be that on my way out, excitement of getting out of there sort of early, right, and having a day ahead of me, may have gotten the better of me as far as my caution level goes.
Sure.
Right, probably a little less, chirping, making the sounds and stuff, and a little, kind of rushing my way out of there a bit more.
Okay. So now you're on your bike and you're riding out.
Mm-hmm.
About 20 minutes into your ride, and you're saying it was about 20 minutes, was it?
Yeah, if that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you see the bear in front of you?
Yeah.
Okay. About how far away?
I think about 100 feet.
Wow, that's close.
Yeah.
That's really close.
Yeah, for sure.
So
that is give or take about as close to a grizzly as I'd ever been before.
no kidding. So what's going through your head when you see this? You figure it'll just spook off right away? Or
That was what I was hoping. Yeah. So, and I can't totally piece it together, but I wasn't making any sounds on my bike. I was just riding my bike.
right.
I think I was coming around a bit of a bend, and it had my eyes up in the trees up to my right,
Okay.
because I knew that I was at the 7-kilometer mark where I got mauled.
Right.
And I think what happened was I had literally just been looking up at the 7-kilometer marker sign,
Okay.
and then looked back down as I kind of came around a bit of a bend, and there was the bear standing on the other side of the road, like on my left-hand side, looking at me.
So you're well acquainted to seeing black bears, just given how many black bears we have around here and where you live. Have you seen many grizzlies out in the wild?
No, I've seen a handful at best.
And the size of this grizzly?
You know, I thought he looked like a small, mangy grizzly bear.
Okay. So you stopped your bicycle?
I stopped my bike and I said, "Hey, bear!"
Yeah.
Right? Probably louder than that, but we're in my house right now.
Sure,
So.
sure.
Yeah, and that was something I timber cruised for almost a year with a close friend who was an excellent forester. And that was our thing we did whenever we saw a bear or saw a sign of a bear, right? We didn't use bear bangers or any of that. We would just yell, "Hey, bear."
You know, there's some bear-aware videos put out by, and you've got a book here as well, by Stephen Herrero. And he's one of the renowned authors and bear experts, both him and Gary Shelton. And there's some videos that were put out that Stephen had worked on as well. And the people in the video shout out, "Whoa, bear, hey,
yeah.
bear." And I swear that these videos have trained generations of people to say, "Whoa, bear, hey, bear," because you can make any noise, you can say anything, but everyone chooses to say, "Hey, bear, whoa, bear." I find that kind of amusing.
Yeah, I would not be the least bit surprised if my friend picked it up from that. Probably not from seeing the video, but just because it's out there in industry.
But that's sound, right? That's a sound decision to make. Letting the bear know that you're there. You don't want it to be surprising it.
Yeah, although I think we were already both surprised.
Okay. Like when you came around the corner, you saw it, was it just standing or did it kind of give a little stutter step, kind of a back?
It was just standing the best I could tell.
Okay. And you're not making any efforts to move closer to it, I should imagine.
No, I stopped immediately and was standing straddling my bike.
Right.
You know, I said the "Hey, bear." I know immediately after the incident, I told people that I talked to the bear calmly as it approached me.
Okay.
On hindsight, I don't believe I did. I think I sort of recreated that I did all the right stuff as it walked up to me the whole way. So I know I yelled, "Hey, bear." I don't know at what point I stopped verbalizing to the bear.
Mm-hmm.
He was standing there and looking at me, and then he would look at the bush, and then look at me and look at the bush. And I remember thinking, just step into the bush.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I thought he was going to step into the woods. And I don't recall fully here, Travis, if he started to approach, and that's when I took my pack off and thought to take one of my hiking poles off my pack and extend my pole.
Mm-hmm.
Should he get close enough, I wanted to fend him away.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I started doing that immediately. I think I went for my pole after he started to walk towards me. And I suspect that once I started rummaging through my pack, I was now thinking about, holy crap, I need to get my pole off my pack so that I can fend this bear off should it get too close.
Well, were you thinking, holy crap, I should get the bear spray out that the camp cook was kind enough to lend me?
No, unfortunately, I was already aware that I'd lost my bear spray before I camped the night.
No.
Yeah, and I had really deep pockets. I mean, the foolhardy thing is that I should have had the bear spray on a carabiner on one of the straps of my backpack where it is imminently accessible. I had it, I mean, geez, you've got your expensive cell phone in one pocket, right, which had some navigational apps and, of course, a camera.
Of course.
And then I had my bear spray deep in the other pocket. And they're good deep pockets. I never suspected it would fall out. I think on one of my last sort of meal and navigation stops that I took on the way up the hill, I sat on a log where my knees were higher than my butt. Mm-hmm. And I think the pepper spray fell out at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, and by the time I realized it had fallen out, it was quite a ways behind me.
Right.
And I just thought of that's a ways back to go. Needle in a haystack, will I ever find it? Hindsight, I probably should have at least tried.
Well, you talk about having it on a carabiner on the back of your pack. And
and the front strap would be the smart place to have it.
It would be. I know a lot of people have moved away from that if a bear attack is sudden and they're curled up with their hands over the back of their neck and keeping their backpack on as a bit of protection if it's on the back of your pack. Not the most accessible for them. I know people have been moving towards chest rigs and they'll have a bit of a Velcro, something that'll even release faster than a carabiner. You just grab it, rip it, and it goes. Having whatever your defense mechanism quick at hand, I guess in hindsight is always great to think about, but it's something that I'm mentioning now just because the listeners might have a bear experience and know all about this, or maybe they don't.
Again, on hindsight, and I can't believe I didn't pick up this tip from the fellow I was telling you about earlier, the man I know that knows those bears and mountains better than anyone else that I know.
Yes.
The guy that's given me the bear attacks book while I was in the hospital.
Yes.
The last article he dons before he hikes into bear country is a strap that he puts around his neck that's got the bear spray on one side and an air horn on the other.
Smart man.
Yeah, very smart. And I'm embarrassed that I never gleaned that from him from all of our conversations. And when I'm next bold enough to get out there, I suspect I will have, if not exactly that, something awfully similar, because that air seems like the best defense.
So the bear starts approaching you. You're rummaging through the pack. You're looking for your poles that you can use as a defensive.
Yeah, they were strapped to the outside of my pack, so they were quite easy to get my hands on.
Okay. And the bear's approaching. Mm-hmm. Started off at about 100 yards.
100 feet?
100 feet. And that's well within. So Gary Shelton, he's a author of some bear books. Stephen Herrero, I see his book here right in front of you, both renowned bear experts. And years ago, I was approached through my company, Silvercore, to put together a bear training program that incorporated bear spray and firearms and avoidance strategies and encounter strategies. And I reached out to both Stephen and Gary, and Stephen was helpful, and he provided some insight and information. Gary turned out to be my wife's aunt's next door neighbor. And he says, Travis, I'm getting out of the training game. Tell you what, if you'd like, I'll give you my lesson plans. I'll give you some training aids. I'll help you. Let's ensure that we're carrying on the tradition of what he spent 35 years in bear country researching these things prior to even getting on with his books here. Let's ensure that this information is being passed on. So I was very, very thankful to the both of them, particularly Gary, who just recently passed away. And I guess where I'm going with this was that you were talking about the distance at 100. So at 100 feet away, Gary had put together a general guideline. And just so the listeners have an idea of really how close this is, because there's going to be people who say, I was 100 feet away. How is that a threat to you? Like, couldn't you just run away? couldn't he get, right? People that just don't understand this. With a bear, Gary had put together his 75-meter guideline and his 25-meter guideline. 75 meters was, okay, we're within 75 meters of the bear, and we better start readying our defensive mechanisms, whether that's bear spray or firearm, or we better get these things prepared. So 75 meters. 25 meters, and you said 100 feet, so 25 meters is what, around 82 feet or something like that?
Yeah, somewhere in the mid-80s. Yeah.
Mid-80s. That's when Gary says it's time to shoot the bear. So not only was this bear within that shoot zone, but you're well beyond it. Let's get ready. You're readying yourself in the zone where typically Gary would say it's time to dispatch this bear. So the bear's approaching. You've got your pole.
Yeah. So and on that note, my thought when I first saw the bear, and I think most people know when you're under that sort of stress, because I was feeling the pressure of the situation, how quickly your thoughts race.
Oh yeah.
I did consider turning and going.
Yeah.
Right or wrong, thought that I was too close to turn and leave. Now I do have a friend that knows bears well. He believes my best chance would have been to possibly just even turn my bike around and slowly ride away, not race away, but slowly ride away, right? There's others that think I could have put my bike down and backed away.
You know,
I just thought I was so darn close that it was time to, like you're suggesting there, ready your defenses.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd heard stories of people having some success with keeping bears at bay with a pole, right? So.
Well, at that distance, even Gary would recommend standing your ground. So there's always going to be the armchair quarterbacks. There's going to be people who say, look at bear behavior. You watch bears in a confined scenario and they're getting in a bit of a row, and one bear kind of looks away a little bit and kind of backs up slowly and then starts walking away, and they say, oh, that's how a human should act. But the thing is, these bears are polysocial creatures. There isn't one thing that you can do that'll apply to every situation, that'll apply to every bear. It's like saying, well, what's the one move I should do if I get into a fight in a bar, right? Well, there isn't the one move. And the biggest thing that people can do is have their wits about them, which is what you had going for you. So I don't think anybody listening to this should look at this and say, well, here's what he should have done, because they don't know and they weren't there. Every situation is different. So I think you should be very, very comfortable in what you did, because the outcome speaks for itself.
I appreciate that. And for what it's worth, the two different career conservation officers I've spoken to have suggested something similar to what you just said there, right? That I didn't necessarily do anything wrong.
No. And
there isn't necessarily also a right thing to do. But having survived it is an indicator that
oh, absolutely.
you didn't do the wrong thing.
So I'm not going to interrupt you this time, and I'm going to let you talk through, because the bear is approaching. You've got your defensive mechanism.
So I pulled the pole out. I'm still hopeful that the bear is going to step off the road. So I strapped my backpack back on. But just the hip strap, there's the strap that goes across the chest. I didn't put that one on because I just didn't feel that I necessarily wanted to be stuck with my pack on.
Right.
The bear just continued to walk slowly up towards me. I was guessing at about 30 feet or so, and I'm not absolutely positive. It was too close for comfort. I had looked into the bush a couple of more times on the way up. So at about 30 feet, and still hadn't gotten off the road. I stepped off my bike, so I was straddling my bike. So I stepped off because I wanted to be able to put my bike between the bear and me. And at that point, he startled, right? So he just, like all four paws, just sort of shuddered or shimmied at the same time.
Okay.
You know, you sort of hear the scratch in the gravel.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe a second later or less, he just started his slow approach towards me again. And continued walking until he was right up beside me. And I would have had to lean, like if I reached out to touch him, if I leaned, I could have touched him. So,
Okay.
you know, he's maybe 3 or 4 feet away.
Okay.
I'm not sure at exactly what point, but I'm pretty sure like his head had, you know, passed the front tire of my bike, you know, on the other side of the road, that we briefly made eye contact.
Okay.
Sincerely, I can't remember if, you know, you weren't supposed to make eye contact with the bear, but I remember thinking, oh man, that definitely doesn't feel right. So it was really brief eye contact. And I turned my head away, obviously, and was looking down at the ground in the direction I was facing, and then like trying to glance sort of sideways at the bear to still have a feel for what's going on.
Right.
And I realized he appeared to be doing the same thing.
Okay.
And he dipped his head a couple of times. Reminded me of what a shy dog might do. If you're trying to pet a dog and they're not sure if they want to let you pet it or not.
Okay.
I think just before that, I remember, I mean, it was so close, and I thought this bear was just going to walk right by. Remember thinking, I wish I was filming this because this is such an unbelievable situation,
Yeah.
right? This would be awesome to have on film.
Yeah.
I wasn't about to reach for my camera though, or my cell phone. So he walked by, and I figure he had about 6 inches further to go, and his rump would have fully cleared the rear wheel of my bike.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that point, you know, he did a 90-degree turn or thereabouts, a 180 turn.
Okay.
And so I turned in kind. I grabbed my bike and I spun it around to put it between us. And at that point, he startled again, like it was a 4-paw sort of shudder.
Right.
And he started to advance towards me. This is all slow, right? The only times he did anything sudden were those 2 times that he startled a little bit.
Okay.
So I held my pole out, and he just slowly walked towards me right into the pole, and it had it placed, you know, in that flat spot between their eyes on the forehead there.
Right.
And he pushed into it a little, and I remember thinking, like, this isn't so bad. Like, he's not charging me. Like, he may just leave me alone here.
Yeah.
And then he rolled the pole off his head and bit onto it.
Okay.
And we tug aboard, you know, for a second or two, and he let go of the pole, and then started moving towards me again. So I dropped the pole, I believe, at this point, and I unclipped my pack, and I'm sliding backwards the best I can while I'm doing this.
Okay.
And I threw the pack between us, and he was quite close.
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit to his side because I didn't want it to seem like I was attacking him.
Right.
I didn't know it was a he at this point either, right?
Sure.
And so, yeah, I didn't want the bear to think that I was attacking him, but I was hopeful that he would take an interest to the food that I had in my pack.
Mm-hmm.
So it was sort of at his feet and a little bit to his side. And he stopped for, I don't know, about a second, sniffed at the pack as I continued to try to get some distance between us. And he turned and continued to walk towards me, and then started pawing at my bike. It started with like a really small sort of, I don't even want to call it a swat because it was more like a probe.
A little test touch.
Yeah, a little test touch. And then he reached his hand or his paw a little bit higher and took another poke. And these each of them bounced off my bike though, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the third one was higher yet, and I'm not sure which one, somewhere between number 4 and number 6. He lifted his paw high enough that I was worried he was going to like swat down and bury me under the bike. So I threw my bike at him at that point. And then at that moment, he was sort of hung up in the bike. Like I think I got it over the paw that he was swatting with.
Okay.
And so he stepped through the bike and then lunged at me and grabbed a hold of me on my left flank.
Okay.
So then, I guess at that point, I realized that, pardon me here, I'm a bit tearful.
No, I get it.
Yeah. Kind of comes and goes. Sometimes I tell the story without any grief, other times a bit more painful. This tearful bit too it's more present now than it was 3 months ago. But I think I'm going to say it's been about the last month and a half, this has been more difficult to kind of think about or talk about. I don't mind doing it still, right? It's important for me to do. But I think it's because like for months I rode the euphoria of, hey, I made it. And now I'm sort of coming to terms with the trauma side of it, as opposed to being so thankful to be alive, right?
It's absolutely a natural part of the process.
Yeah, so the bear's got me by the side. I'm suspended in the air by him. I maybe got a heel dragging, and that's it. I'm aware at this point of, like I'm in big freaking trouble here, right? It's all the idea of, wow, I wish I had this on tape as this thing walks right past me was gone. It was like, oh man, I'm screwed. I don't recall putting up any sort of resistance at that point. I remember thinking that if he carries me into the woods, I'm screwed here. But he carried me along the road for, I'm going to guess, maybe 40 feet or so.
Okay.
And then ultimately put me down at the edge of the road with my head just touching the ditch line. Why exactly he put me down, I'm not sure. If he was, a little bit tired, or if I was maybe falling out of his grip, just, kind of sort of tearing free. But then he cinched up his bite again on me, on my flank or sort of abdomen, my side there. At that point, I had the opportunity to fight back. So in my mind, I was going to give him a double eye gouge, like from the movies.
Yes.
And I pictured like me, like literally pushing his eyes in. I couldn't reach one of them; it was too far away. Even though his jaw is like, right at my belly button, right? I couldn't reach his other eye. So I just grabbed a handful of fur on the close eye, right? And just grabbed the fur near his ear there and poked into his big brown eye as hard as I could.
Were you able to get the thumb in there?
Man, the way when I tell people, I don't know if it'll come through on this, but it was about that long, I think it lasted, the snap of a finger.
Yes.
And the next thing I know, my legs are in the ditch and my upper body's out of the ditch. So, and the moment that I poked him in the eye, he reacted strongly enough that I spun 180 and was completely disorientated in that moment, right? So how, if he swatted me around or shook, I'm not sure. It was a pretty large tear on my back by my kidney there, which may indicate that was a shake.
Your kidney was exposed, from what I understand, or your organs were.
I've got it in writing somewhere that the trauma surgeons like exact words, but it was something to the effect of I was one cellular layer from my kidney being exposed.
Okay.
So I don't know, right? It may have been visible, but there was one layer stopping infection from getting through into my internal cavity.
So pain, massive pain, or overwhelmed with adrenaline and...
No, I would say not a whole lot of pain. Like it was, I knew I was badly injured, but it was warm, right? Like it just, like it wasn't yet painful.
What do you mean warm? Just sort of like a glowing...
It just felt hot. It was warm. Like I don't,
Okay.
it wasn't hot like if you touched a wood stove.
Yeah.
But it was warm. It was uncomfortable, but it wasn't painful. Like it might be more like those times when I don't know if you ever cut yourself with a really sharp knife, and you're injured, but it doesn't hurt yet. And it's really not that bad dealing with it until maybe you're running under cold water, and it's like, oh man, there's the pain.
It's usually when I ignore it and let the infection set in.
I had to avoid the pain. Yeah, I can appreciate that. But so it was kind of that. Like I knew I was injured, but it just didn't hurt that much.
Okay.
At least not yet. So now I'm spun around. My legs are in the ditch. My upper body's out. And I think, and again, I remember most of what happened. I don't necessarily remember the specific order of it all. But then sometimes as I piece it together and or tell the story or reflect on things, it makes more sense to me how it all shook down. So he started after I was spun with my legs in the ditch. He started biting my legs. And believe he bit into my right thigh a few times. And then he kind of went ballistic a bit, or a bit more thrashy. And he bit into my left thigh, and I remember telling the trauma staff that he only bit my right leg once. And they would say, no, he bit you more than once there. And I said, no, he only bit my right leg once. Okay. And they said, well, the wounds indicate that you were bit more than one time there.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so then I realized on hindsight that he spent so little time on my right leg, but he was a bit more thrashy there. So I think I took it as just one chomp. But I guess he chomped a few times and it was more shaky. And then he transferred off of that leg and got on my other leg. And I imagine at this point, like I'm thrashing too, right? Like I have an opportunity to defend myself. I'm no longer hanging from his jaw. But he got his paws under my left leg and he lifted my left leg up and bit down on the edge of my left foot. So I didn't have any damage on my foot. Okay. And then he came back down on my leg. So at this point, that thrash was over from him getting on my right leg and then my left up high. And he came back down to biting on my left thigh. And he's got me pinned with his leg on, my stomach. And he would just bite into my thigh and shake a little bit as if to sink his teeth deeper. But he wasn't thrashing per se, right? I never got ragdolled by the bear, except for maybe when he spun me. Sure. When I poked him in the eye, right?
Sure.
And then he would bite, and then he would lift up quite far with me still pinned, right? Just lift his head fairly far off my body. And then he would bite down and sink his teeth in again and then lift up and bite down. And I don't know if he did that, 3 times or 6 times, but, it was a number of these repeat bites. And then he settled in on my upper thigh And I remember at one point, it was feeling like my hip was going to dislocate, like he was really torquing on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had both my hands on that side, and I tried peeling his jaw off, and I remember thinking how feeble that attempt is in reality.
Man.
In the moment.
Yeah.
But I also remember thinking, but what else are you going to do?
Yeah.
you have to do something.
I thought I read somewhere that you thought about playing dead, but realized.
Yeah, so I'll get there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So at this stage, I haven't remembered that I even have a knife.
Okay.
Right, like right from the beginning, I remembered my poles.
Yeah.
Because I've heard stories of people fighting bears off with poles.
Isn't it funny how we revert back to what we know or our training? Right?
the eye gouge, it's straight out of the movies.
Sure.
But it, against all odds, people win their fights that way so often in cinema, right? Yeah, so I've got my thumbs in his mouth, trying to peel his jaw off, and I mean, it seems feeble, but I suspect I'm doing it with all the power I can muster.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing, the yellow teeth and the drool, and just really trying to peel him off me. And I guess it bugged him enough that he let go of my leg and he bit down on my hand. And then he got back into biting my leg again. And I think at this point, he moved a little further down my leg, and I'm of the estimation that that's where he actually started to more sort of excavate.
Mm-hmm.
So enough of the sort of full mouth bites of my leg.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was more using his his canines to sort of chew in towards the bone.
Right.
I can't remember at what point I started feeling the grating of his teeth on my bone, or I don't know that I per se could feel that, but I heard the like a,
Wow.
it reminded me of the classic neighborhood lab chewing on a big cow bone.
Right.
Yeah, and then so at some point in this,
And that was your femur.
yeah, I think so, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, wherever that sound came from, I don't know if that can come from tendons, if it was possibly his teeth, but boy, it sure sounded like bone.
Wow.
I mean, at this stage of the game, and he was further than I could reach. I couldn't peel his mouth off. Like I was yelling aloud, things like stop and why. I've got all the horrible thoughts, at this stage too of, the old bye to the wife and kids.
Right.
I was thinking that, is he going to drag me into the woods, where I slowly die? Is he going to eat me to death, right? And it's probably only a few seconds for all this to race through.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it, I think, why I was yelling why and stop, because typically you hear of people getting thrashed by a grizzly and then left alone.
Mm-hmm.
And it just seemed unrelenting. Like where was the point where he's supposed to stop and give me a chance, right? So somewhere along there, I remembered, I've got a knife. So I went to reach for my knife, and he bit in a spot, or like it was in the same area, but the bite that he made was so painful, and I don't recall it being that painful prior, like even when it felt like my hip was going to dislocate.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it really hurt. It was different than when he was carrying me. Right at this point, like it really hurt.
Mm-hmm.
There was one bite. I remember because I had been rehabbing sciatica issues. This was all part of getting into good enough shape that I could do these adventures.
Right.
I remember one of his bites, I felt the numbness in my lower back and in my big toe at the same time.
Okay.
I thought, oh man, there goes my sciatic nerve.
Right.
I was concerned that he had done damage to my femoral artery already from those bites that he'd been doing, like near my crotch and my upper thigh there. But nothing hurt like these few bites that he did. And the one I remembered my knife, so I went to reach for my knife, and he had that super painful bite. And I arched back, arms in the air, like I'm picturing me like just flailing wildly and yelling, ah! And I thought, okay, like I'm arched back here now, I'm gonna play dead. And so I tried to lay there and play dead, and he hit that super sensitive spot again, and he goes, ah! And I thought, man, I can't play dead screaming like this.
Yeah.
I've got to get my knife. And I don't know if I gained the resolve to get my knife and didn't feel the pain anymore, or if the damage had been done and so I wasn't feeling the pain anymore as he continued to excavate.
Mm-hmm.
So my arms were trapped on my left side under the weight of his body. So he's got a leg and his chest laying on my abdomen while he's chewing on my thigh a little closer to my knee than to my pelvis. I want to probably say about 2/3 of the way down.
Sure.
Right? My inner thigh. So I couldn't pull my right arm to my right pocket where my knife was. So I used both hands to use everything I had to push my hand down into my stomach and just wiggle through, pushing and pulling to get through to the other side. And then I crawled with my fingers down to where my pocket knife was, and with both hands on that side, used them to open the knife, put the knife in my left hand, and slid it back through. And what I didn't know at the time was I actually gave him what the conservation officer referred to as a large cut on his chest.
Okay.
But I didn't know it, and the bear didn't seem to change his activity from that.
Okay.
So I pulled the knife through, and again, on hindsight, thankfully not cutting myself, but
Yeah, no kidding.
I imagine I had the inherent wherewithal, like, 'cause I don't recall thinking it out, but to not point the blade towards me on the way out,
Right.
like as I was pulling the blade across my body and his.
Right.
And then I leaned forward. And at this stage, and again from a story my little brother had told me of a grizzly attack survivor that had the bear mauling his stomach at the time, and this guy stabbed it repeatedly in the neck until it ran off and ultimately died.
Right. I remember that story.
Yeah, and I was remembering that in this moment of I'm getting my knife, I have my knife, now it's time to stab this bear in the neck as many times as I possibly can.
Okay.
And I leaned forward so that I could reach his neck, and he was intent, just chewing at my leg still. And I reached till I'm guessing, maybe 6 inches out or so. And then I stabbed with, all the strength I had into his neck.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not totally sure if it was, me pulling back to stab again, or if it was him pulling off of me. But either way, he immediately let go of my leg and pulled his head up off me. And he got to a point where I couldn't reach his neck anymore with my knife. And I remember being so disappointed that I couldn't continue to stab him in the neck.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't want to stab him in the shoulder. And then in that brief moment where I was, thinking that, a big gush of blood came out of his neck and onto my hips. And I said aloud at that point, now you're bleeding too, bear. Because I had a charge there. I'm getting verklempt again. But I had such a charge of adrenaline, although I didn't feel it at the time. But I actually felt like I was in the fight for the first time after a pretty prolonged attack at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I don't know if we've been, 30 seconds or 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect it took them 30 seconds anyways to carry me as far as he did towards the edge of the road.
Wow.
Yeah, so then he stepped right up off me. And he walked around me about to the center of the road, and then up the road, so opposite the way he had originally approached me from, back towards my bike. And he veered towards the bush. Again, I'm thinking, just go into the woods. And then he veered back towards my mountain bike. And he was bleeding the whole way. Like, it seemed like there was a gush of blood with probably each heartbeat.
Okay.
And he got up to my bike, and he was sniffing at my bike, and I saw him poop 3 times and take a huge pee.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, wow, like I think I laid a lethal wound on him,
Mm-hmm.
because that's a considerable amount of shock he appeared to be in. And
Right.
the way he was bleeding, it was just a phenomenal amount of blood. I moved a few times, and when I moved, it got more of his attention than I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to sort of see what was going on, but not to make too much motion. So then he sniffed away at the front tire of my bike for, I'm not sure how long, but it's quite a while. It was, not minutes, but again, probably half a minute or so.
Okay.
Then he turned and he walked back in my direction, but he stayed on the other side of the road, like just past the center of the road, as he walked back in my direction. Once he got about even with me, maybe a touch past, he started to veer back towards the woods. And ultimately, again, I didn't know this at the time, but I suspect it was about there. I think he walked back to where he had initially stepped out.
Mm-hmm.
And then he stood there, and he would look at me, and he'd look at the woods. And I'm looking at him and thinking, man, just fall over. The bleeding was slowing, but he was still bleeding. And I thought, like, what can I do here? Well, I'm waiting, like I need to do something. But again, if I moved too much before, it had gotten more of his attention than I
Right.
liked. And I just really didn't think I could sustain any more abuse, right?
Right.
So I thought in that moment, and this might have been a lifesaver, that the bear stood there as he did. Because had he not, I'm not certain that I would have thought to put the tourniquet on.
Right.
I might have just gone and gotten on my bike and tried to get back to the camp. I don't know either way on this, because I had a pile of thoughts
Sure.
before I got on my bike. So I had my knife with me, so I started cutting the sleeve off my thankfully long sleeve shirt. And I thought this part was kind of funny. So through all this and all the adrenaline, I did the cut of my sleeve and then tried to pull the sleeve off, and I couldn't get it. So I cut a whole bunch more of my sleeve, pulled again and couldn't get it off, and then cut a whole bunch more a third time, thinking, seriously, like, what is this shirt made of? So finally I pulled the bloody sleeve off, and I started hiking it up over my leg. And sorry to anyone that might listen to this, but I got it up and I started trying to tighten the tourniquet, and it felt that my pants were too bundled around my leg to
Right.
tie the tourniquet well. So I looked up and I started pulling my pants down, like unraveling them from up there, and they were really thrashed to ribbons.
Mm-hmm.
And as I pulled them down, I realized that it wasn't my bunched up pants around my leg. It was the meat sort of volcanoing out of the puncture wounds around my leg
Right.
that the tourniquet didn't want to tighten down over.
Right.
So I stopped looking at that, and I kind of leaned back again and just went by feel and pulled the tourniquet up past those puncture wounds. And thank God I've got pencil legs. And my wife calls them Wednesday legs.
Why is that?
Wednesday gonna break.
Oh, yeah.
they're pretty skinny. Anyhow, so I tightened the tourniquet and I cinched it like you get your half hitch in there and
Yeah.
and cinched it down. And I was able to get another half hitch in there, like the classic granny knot.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I had, an inch or two. Maybe when I get my stuff back from the COs, I will know how much room I had to spare to tie that knot. If it got salvaged, I don't know if it did, right? But either way, there wasn't much left for me to get that second knot in there. But the knot held. I believe at this point, I turned and looked and the bear was gone. I honestly don't remember at what point he disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't suspect I would have had the courage to crawl to my bike if the bear was still there.
Mm.
Or, I wouldn't have. Yeah, so the bear was gone. And then I'm laying there. It's probably at this point that I looked at the time and saw it was 12:01. Thought to myself, should I wait here for when the crew trucks come down from their day of work and have them rescue me? Or should I get onto my bike? I'd forgotten in the trauma, either that or my bad memory, that Vito, the logger, and he gave me the lift up there, had told me that the crew that was there was leaving by boat each day. So had I chosen to wait, that would have been it for me. But I looked at the time, and my thought at the time was they're likely not coming back down until 4 o'clock.
Right.
And I didn't think I had 4 hours to wait.
Right.
So I chose to crawl towards my bike. I personally think this part is hilarious. I tried to crawl to my bike and I couldn't do it. I made it about 3 steps with my knees, and the pain from the gravel pebbles on the road hurt my knees, and my knees are uninjured at this point, right? Hurt more than I could bear to crawl the, 40 or 50 feet back to my bike.
That is funny.
Yeah, and I remember cursing myself in my head. So in this whole journey, once the attack was on, the only thing I said aloud was to the bear once he was bleeding, right? And then it became an internal struggle and me talking to myself.
Right.
And I said, Dowler, seriously? You've been through all this and you can't suck up a bit of pain in your knees? But I couldn't do it. So I rolled onto my butt and I pushed with my good leg, right? My left leg was seemingly useless at the time.
Okay.
So with my good leg in my hands, and I skidded on my butt back to my bike. I got to my bike, my pole must have been close, or maybe when I threw it at the bear, it went past. I don't get it, but my pole was there.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried using my pole to get my way onto the bike, and that didn't work. I think I fell and actually bent my pole doing that. So then I used my bike to pull myself up onto it, and I'm not sure how, but I flopped my left leg over the bike.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and I realized after I was telling a man that interviewed me to write a piece for the Hospital Foundation in Vancouver.
Okay.
It was when I was telling him the story, I realized, wow, I had my knife in my hand this whole time. I kind of forgot that through all of this, right, I'm probably white knuckling this little pocket knife, right? Either way. So I take my first attempt to get started on my bike and immediately collapse over the other side of it and hit the ground. Possibly the most disheartening part of the whole adventure.
Okay.
But in that moment, I also told myself, right, Dowler, you got one chance to do this and to get on your bike. It's now or never, all or nothing. Just all the sort of things you motivate yourself with, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was super scared right? Because took me so much the first time. And the second time, it was surprisingly easy, right? Like it was a lot easier than the first attempt.
Was it the mental motivation?
Yeah, approaching it from the other side.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I suspect it was motivation, right? Adrenaline. I don't know how adrenaline works, but you know how many second wins a guy can have, right? You know, it's been minutes now too, I suspect, since my initial surge of adrenaline from when I stabbed the bear, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so either way, I pulled myself onto the bike and pedaled and, you know, got going. I was pretty pleased about that. At the time, I thought I had a 4-kilometer ride on the flat before the hill broke downhill. On reasonable authority, I have it was more like a 3.5-kilometer flat stretch.
Okay.
Before it actually broke to a downhill drift.
So were you pedaling? Were you just pushing with one leg?
I was pedaling, and I mean, I pedaled when I had to. I coasted as much as I could.
Mm-hmm.
I used the classic skiing trick when you're traversing. If there's like a little bit of a side slope,
right,
you take advantage of that.
Yeah.
To gain speed, and then you hit a flat, and then you can sort of use that momentum into the next little uphill.
Yeah.
So whenever there was a crown in the road and I could, you know, slowly drift sideways to rest for a moment, I used that. But basically my right leg pedaled down, and my left leg, I just used the weight of it to fall down. I was probably able to use it a little bit to pull the pedal backwards.
Okay.
To get the other pedal to where I could have another downward push.
Yeah.
I cycled quite a lot as a youth, so I was really comfortable working the gears to my advantage.
Okay.
I pedaled, and it just felt like I'd pedaled so long. So another disheartening point was when I saw the 5-kilometer marker.
Oh, yeah.
So I was at 7. I figure I got to get to 3.
Yeah.
So I thought that downhill was coming any moment. And I see the 5-kilometer mark. Thinking, oh man, halfway? Right? So that was a tough piece for me.
How'd you tackle that?
I just, same old, you know, I don't know, there's every sports cliche you probably ever heard, right? Right? Suck it up, buttercup, all that, right?
Sure.
But I just knew that. I said, okay, well, that's got a long ways to go here. You know, breathe in the nose, out the mouth.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know that I did a whole lot. Like, I don't know how I channel my motivation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty good at switching a bad mood into a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty motivated, you know, if I get bummed, it doesn't last long and I'm out doing something. But I definitely reflected on my perseverance in high school sports.
Okay.
I did a fair amount of distance running. And I was also I'm a fairly small guy, right? My fit weight is about 125 pounds.
Okay.
I've forever, or at least again in my athletic high school days, had to dig deep
Right.
to sort of keep up with my peers in athletic endeavors, and or just like the classic boyhood roughhousing.
Right.
Right. I wasn't one to make it easy for my bigger friends to sort of pick on me, right? Or
So you channeled all of that. You're thinking about that while you're riding?
not the way I used to combat with my larger friends.
Right.
Right. But I was definitely thinking about high school sports.
Okay.
Right. And largely because that was the last time I had ever really willed myself to dig so competitively deep.
Mm.
Because once you're not competing anymore,
Right.
you don't really
Sure.
think to dig deep, right?
Sure.
So I just tried to put myself back into how I persevered back then to either be at the front of the pack or nipping at the heels
Right.
of whoever the local champion was, right? So either way, I dug deep and kept pedaling. One point after that 5K mark, my left foot fell off the pedal. That was a really scary moment. I was actively pedaling at the time. I didn't have long to coast, and I'm certain that if I fell off my bike, I wasn't going to be able to get back on my bike.
Right.
I mean, I can feel my seat warming up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm certain it's warming up with blood. I'm not looking to check or feeling right. I'm just trying to focus on, breathing and riding.
Right.
My foot falls off. I didn't have long to coast before I had to have my foot back on the pedal. And so, I've got to hook my toe under the other pedal to get that pedal low enough that I can get my leg back on, which I couldn't lift naturally back on. So, I grab a handful of pant to pull my foot back on and get it on there and start pedaling again and tell myself, Colin, concentrate, right? God, you can't let that happen again. So it got down to just thinking of the most simple elements. I'd breathe and pedal and put all my focus on, balancing my bike and pedaling along, except for possibly my one silly typical man moment of when I had hit the brake and started to coast downhill. And remember, I've done this road before.
Yeah.
So when I knew it got going fast, to the point that when I was on the road with a helmet in good shape before, I used my brakes on the descent.
Yeah.
I've got this knife in my hand still. And you're doing the shifting and everything with my right hand, with the knife there.
Yeah.
And thinking I can't safely use my brake, my rear brake on my right, with this knife in my hand, or I'm going to risk losing my knife.
Yeah.
So the smart thing to do is ditch the knife.
Sure.
But if I live, I want this knife, damn it. So I took the time, as any stupid, stubborn guy would, to fold my lock blade knife at risk of crashing, and folded it up and stuffed it in my pocket, and coasted down. So at this point, now that I'm coasting down, and feel free to interrupt any time here too, right? I've been talking for quite a while.
Well, the only thing that strikes me in this is your decision to fold that knife up might not necessarily have been a stubborn act to hold on to the knife, but maybe it was your mental resolve that I'm living through this and I'm keeping that knife.
Yeah, I agree with you, but that's vanity though, right? Like that's typical, you know what I mean?
Whatever you want to call it, it's just one extra piece of that puzzle that's telling your brain, this isn't how it's ending.
Fair enough, right? Yeah,
Sure.
That's to hang on to the knife.
But I love it. That's fantastic.
It's certainly me not giving up. Right?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
And on the ride, like you said, and I'm guessing it was before my foot fell off the pedal, because that was a moment of holy smokes, like focus here, or you're not going to make it. I was having thoughts like, I might be an amputee when this is all over, but I'm okay with that.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
There's I had a few opportunities to give up, I suppose, and that might have been one, right? But either way, so anyhow, so I got the knife in my pocket, drifting down the road, and I was thinking to myself at this point, like, how am I going to arrive at camp? Right? Like, what am I going to do when I arrive? Because it took me quite a bit of yelling and poking around to get the attention of the cook the first time I found him. So that was on my mind. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to get there. and I'm just going to yell help as loud as I can, as many times as I have to, until he hears me. And then once I have his attention, I'm going to ask him to call a helicopter.
So you're already planning, mentally role-playing and planning your own rescue before anything's happened. You're thinking through exactly what needs to be done for your survival. That's...
Yeah, maybe not exactly, but for sure some of it, because I knew I was in a really bad way. I was concerned that I wasn't going to survive the bike ride. And I mean, being the manager of maintenance and operations for the health authority on the North Island, I'm somewhat familiar with heliports.
Sure.
and that probably the majority of air, how would one say it? Because I don't think it would be a medevac, at least not in our terms, but for the inbound helicopters with a survivor on board or someone that needs assistance, the majority of those come from the bush.
Right.
It's the logging industry.
Right.
So I knew there was that opportunity was available for me, and I just wanted to make sure that that ball got rolling right away, right?
So how long were you yelling help for?
So here is the glory of all of my good fortune, right? All the little mini miracles in this, not the least of which is that knife that I had with me. My dad had given to me only maybe 3 weeks earlier,
right,
as a random gift, and possibly the only gift I've gotten from him other than my birthday or Christmas in my adult life.
Right.
So it's like really a unique fluke, right?
The universe unfolds as it should.
Yeah, I suppose. So I'm thinking there's going to be one guy there, and it might be hard to get his attention. So I come riding into the stairwell that goes into like their mess hall, right? Their common room.
Yep.
And I stuck my landing nicely, right? Got my handlebars landed like right on the one railing and my bike seat.
Okay.
On the one behind or near it.
Yeah.
I went to get off my bike and I collapsed onto the stairs and the stoop. Probably half my body was on the stairs, the other half on the landing. Just as the fluke would have it, their sliding glass door was open. The screen was closed. And the 5 loggers that were in there, not just the one, were already making comments to me before I'd gotten a word out.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that they're laughing about my graceless crash landing, right? Having no idea of the situation I was about to put them in. Sorry, guys. So either way, I heard them and I stuck with my plan. Although I might have added a bit to it. I yelled to them as loud as I could, help. I think I then said, I've been mauled by a grizzly. Call 911 or call a helicopter, whichever I yelled, right?
Right.
But I think I said I've been mauled by a grizzly before I gave the 911 bit,
Okay.
right, or the helicopter. So they came running out. I suspect that Vito went straight for the phone.
Okay.
And there was panic in the air for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, not being ready for this at all, right? This isn't a scenario where someone's been injured in the bush and they're on the radio saying, get ready, we're coming in hot with an injury here.
Right.
Right, so they're running through the camp gathering the stuff that they may need. One of the things they were looking for was a spine board or something of that effect to get me onto, to get me off these stairs.
Yeah.
They'd given me a glass of water at this point, and oh man, that felt so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I asked the guys, I'm like, guys, can you please, get me off these stairs? I don't know if I said please. and there's like, yeah. And I'm guessing there was 2 or 3 guys there at one point. And the one guy in the adrenaline of the moment, and I'm thankful he did it because I was reasonably confident I didn't have any sort of spinal injury.
Okay.
But he just grabbed me by himself when they were kind of struggling on how to figure it out, and heaved me into the building and laid me down there. I think they just waited. They did have a blanket down before they plopped me in there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They got a blanket down there. He heaved me and popped me down. And they just kept, scrambling away and checking things out. Again, I can't speak for exactly what they did. I could hear them yelling back and forth to one another, asking where equipment was. And I'm saying, try here, I tried it, try there, oh yeah, right. They used up all 3 of their first aid kits.
Okay.
So they had one in the camp, one in a crummy, and one in a sea can. They ran out of the tourniquets that come with those kits.
Yeah.
And started using triangle bandages. I can't remember at what point I asked if we should remove my tourniquet or not. And I don't know if at this point or not, if Vito was still on with an RN.
Okay.
So he had called 911. They had started by asking him to call a logging company to fly me out of there.
Okay.
He told them, we don't have time for that. Like this has to be air ambulance.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thankful that they trust his judgment. Like there's a lot of good faith that
Sure.
goes into this, especially with like government-run services
Mm-hmm.
and the jurisdictions that they are and are not allowed to operate in. So, and I remember hearing him explaining to, I'm not sure if it was a pilot or if it was 911, that there was plenty of room for a helicopter to land. But either way, he was having the negotiation with them, like how
Sure.
how to get there, and that yes, in fact,
Good for him.
you will be able to get. Oh, man, these guys were so awesome, right? Like they really.
Okay.
So they negotiated that yes, taking the tourniquet off is a good idea because my leg was not feeling very well,
Mm-hmm.
and getting the tourniquet off actually helped.
Okay.
And then and at that point, I don't know. I think they were already, had like cut open my pant leg, and were bandaging the wounds.
Mm.
Vito mentioned that with each time they closed one wound,
Yeah.
that another one would like take over
man.
where that one left off. Like they
Yeah.
would patch like the worst one, right? Then the next one would start
like
leaking as
whack-a-mole.
badly. Yeah, exactly. I remember asking the guys a bunch of times. Oh, they kept, doing the stay with us here. You're doing well. Like they're saying all the right stuff. And sorry guys, but I was not. Like I know it's just stuff people have to say, right? Because
I get it.
I knew I was in tough,
Yeah.
and that they were just saying it, and that there was some serious concern
Yeah.
for my odds at that point, right?
Yeah.
They got me on the phone with my brother, and I can't remember how many calls I made. I tried my wife first, although I knew my odds of getting her weren't great because she was day camping
Okay.
while I was gone, right? So usually out of reception. So then I got through to my brother, and we chatted, and it was a good chat. I mean, I could tell obviously he was upset. I wasn't positive I was going to make it. So I was doing my best in that to let him know that I did well,
Yeah.
right? That, that he told me this, I don't remember saying this, right? But he told me that I was telling him, well, if little else, there's a dead bear laying up in the bush, right? Like I was
Yeah.
trying to play to machismo in the moment, right? Yeah. So either way, I don't know how we ended the conversation, but I started to feel that I needed to save my breath, right? Like as much as the guys wanted to keep me talking.
Right.
Air ambulance was 40 minutes away from when they agreed to fly. We were prepared for an hour. And I understand they were only 40 minutes in the end. And there was just no way I was going to be able to keep talking that whole time, right?
Right.
So I got off the phone with them, but I kept checking in with the guys. They had a rap music soundtrack going on Sirius Radio or something right in the background.
And you like rap.
And I like my hip hop.
That's right.
Yeah, so I asked them, hey guys, is this Beastie Boys playing? And I just tried to help. And, you know, we were making the odd joke, or at least I was trying to make the odd joke. I think they were perhaps being a bit more respectful than that. I remember one of the guys, and he was holding pressure on my kidney wound, which I could tell they were really concerned about, right? More concerned about that than my leg, it appeared to me.
Okay.
The one guy says, so Colin, how's it feel? He might not have said my name, right? He says, so how's it feel to have 5 guys use their level 1 first aid for the first time ever? So, but it gives you an idea of, there was, I don't know if levity's the right word, but we were...
Oh, you have to have it.
Yeah, like there was a little bit of jocularity. We were reaching for humor to kind of lighten the situation, right?
Yes.
I know the RN on the phone with Vito told him to stop giving me water. And I remember them saying, guys, no more water. And me thinking, oh, water's so good. I would ask those guys, can I go on my back? Right? My side was getting so numb.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, just a few minutes longer, man. The helicopter's coming, right? We're worried about this wound on your back. So yeah, so I gutted that out. Not that I had much choice. I don't think they would have let me roll over through any amount of begging. Yeah. And I can't remember if I tried calling my dad or not. You know what? I'm reasonably certain I did. If I got an answer machine, I didn't leave a message. I didn't think that was appropriate.
Right.
So I had done my wife, my dad, my brother. I know my wife was my first call, right? Don't know who my second one was. I'd obviously forgotten my dad was off in his boat and was out of cell range, right? But then I had the guy call my boss.
Your boss?
To let him know I wasn't going to make it into work.
Oh,
right?
come on.
So, hey, you know what? Maybe that was the point when they're like, okay, we can maybe stop with the phone calls here because he's down to calling work.
Oh, man.
Right, which is pretty funny. So then my boss guy got off of him dealing with that probably relatively abrupt phone call. What do I do?
And did I understand that they gave you a blood transfusion before you got on the or while you're in the helicopter?
No, on the logging camp floor.
Yeah.
So I don't know how long they spent with me on the logging camp floor, but upon their arrival, at that point I was confident I was going to live. They seemed confident I was going to live. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but they made a comment to the effect of, you know, you're lucky because we've only recently been given the authority to give blood on the scene. And if we couldn't give blood on the scene, your odds of making it back to the hospital alive would be slim.
Wow.
Right,
So everything's just lining up here for you.
Yeah, boy, if only barely, right? But to make a comment like that helped me think, wow, like I'm gonna make it, right? Because they're saying, right, a few months ago, this would have been nip and tuck if we could have returned you to a hospital alive.
Yeah.
And they're saying in this moment, you're going to live because we can give you blood. And they gave me 2 bags of blood while I laid on the hospital or on the logging camp floor there.
Wow.
Yeah, man, they were awesome. Those guys were Johnny on the spot.
How's recovery been?
Good, I would say.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in the beginning, I was so happy to be alive. It just didn't really matter. And I was telling myself things like, hey, you know what? Like, as long as I can still go fishing, you know, I'm laughing because, hey, guess what? Like,
Man after my own heart. I love it.
And I just cheated death here, right?
Yeah.
Oh, there's another thing there, too. And I know you asked when I first saw the bear, what did I think?
Yeah.
Right? And I thought, you know, grizzly.
Sure.
But then I thought, that's not a very big grizzly, and it looks kind of mangy.
Yeah.
So in the end, it was a 350-pound bear,
Okay.
4 or 5 years old, measured 9 foot nose to toe, and was a specimen of a healthy, fit 4 or 5-year-old bear.
Yeah.
And the COs estimate it would have been a 600 or 700-pound bear had it have lived to full adult size.
Wow.
And all the indications, right, like the autopsy of it, although when I talked to conservation, they hadn't autopsied its brain yet,
Okay.
but there was no indication of it being an unhealthy bear at all. So the sort of manginess that I saw was likely its wet fur, having just stepped out of the bush.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting how the brain processes that.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I haven't seen a whole ton of grizzly bears
Sure.
either, right? So you just picture a big, fluffy animal, right? But
The picturesque ones that you see on the people mount on walls, pictures of them. So male grizzly, basically, I guess an adolescent, more or less, they're just entering into the adulthood phase.
Adult is 7 to 9
Right.
when they roll into adulthood, I think.
Right. And weight-wise, the coastal grizzlies can get a lot bigger than inland grizzlies. Males can get a lot bigger than the females, but it's still a big bear.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's interesting is that age group of a bear can quite often be the nuisance. It's just like an adolescent child, right? They pushing their boundaries, seeing what they can get away from. And when you relay it to me, of course, I wasn't there, but I get the sense that the bear was testing and pushing and seeing how far he could go with you. And, that didn't hurt when I swatted out. Oh, nothing really happened. And let's go further. Let's keep pushing the boundaries. And when you jab that bear in the neck with a knife, whoops.
Yeah, you realized, hang on.
Right. Yeah. This isn't as fun anymore. Yeah. And if I recall correctly, the COs, when they went out to find that bear and dispatch it, that bear was stalking them prior to them having to dispatch it.
Don't want to put words in their mouth, but I understand when they ultimately did shoot the bear, it was 12 feet away from one of them.
Wow.
Yeah, but not like you have to qualify that. Mm-hmm. It wasn't on even ground where it would easily close that. Like it was,
sure,
you know, down an embankment, there's an obstruction, but for as many hours as they were looking for the bear and they kept thinking, oh, there it is, but then there it wasn't, right? It seemed to play cat and mouse with them right up until the end.
Bears can be a pretty emotional topic. We've got legislation in British Columbia that has prohibited grizzly bear hunting, and there's polarizing opinions on this. Have you encountered negative backlash from this encounter, from the people saying, hey, you should never have been in grizzly bear country to begin with, and poor bear was put down? Have you encountered any of that?
Not directly. Some of the things you read, right? I mean, you perhaps have read a whole bunch of them, I don't know. But in this one, and they were good at qualifying it, saying, look, I'm happy he's going to live, but. And it was fairly fair and reasonably civilized, right? And the one was that, you know, I'm just upset that, you know, another one of nature's beautiful animals dies because an entitled man is off. And that's the point where I think, well, but.
Come on now.
Yeah, hang on now. Like, I guess I am entitled to go hiking in the forest.
Sure you are.
Right? And I'm also entitled, especially at that time, which was my belief, that I don't have to worry about bears because I'm at one with nature. Like as hippy dippy as that sounds.
Yeah.
Right? I'm a hunter, but I've never bought a bear tag. I've never shot at a bear. Right? Like there's just there was no reason for me to be in a bear attack. But I understand that, when we live in and amongst bears, that in the end I'm more on team human, right?
I'd agree with you on that one. Before we wrap things up here, is there anything that we should touch on? Is there anything that you'd like to say? You'd like to have out there, known?
And I just hope, like in all of this, that it helps with bear awareness on average. I mean, there's something to be said for being happy-go-lucky and not being afraid of nature. Otherwise, you'll never truly appreciate it.
Yes.
But it's also uncomfortable saying that one is foolish to not be properly prepared in bear country, and I wasn't properly prepared, and we certainly don't know if I would or wouldn't have been saved by bear spray. But I sure wish I had it in that moment, because it may very well have scared that bear off.
From my background in training, the one thing that I found intriguing through this is how you and others defaulted to what they knew, defaulted to their training. So you talked about gouging the eyes of the bear because that was something somewhere ingrained in you that's a good technique. Poking the eyes for defense of whatever it might be, or the fact that you never let go of that knife again afterwards, or it's originally started with just a death grip, knowing, hey, I remember innately you've been trained because you've heard the stories about that guy who stabbed the bear in the neck a number of times and killed the bear, and how we just revert to essentially what we know. And from a training standpoint, even the first aid that people will go through to take a first aid course and a month later forget everything. Having an awareness, having your story as a reminder, you're that guy now. You are that guy that people will be thinking about in the future. They're on their bike. Okay, I'm going to put my bike between me and the bear. I got my pole. Oh, right, I got a knife, right? Or maybe they'll think, he really wished he had bear spray.
And an air horn.
And an air horn. I'm going to go out. So thank you very, very much for sharing this with me, sharing this with the listeners. What an incredible tale.
For sure. Don't underestimate the wildlife out there.